Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to talk about some thrillers and horror books. As always, there are some hits and misses, but I'll say particularly this time around, I noticed that there were a lot of books that I thought I was really gonna love that I didn't, and some really good surprises, books that I thought would just be okay that turned out to be a lot better. All that being said, let's get into the books. Let's start by talking about the thriller books because I only have one, and that is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This is the last of her backlist books that I needed to read. I am a huge fan of her work. I consider her to be one of my favorite thriller authors, and I really need to do more to highlight her on my channel. But this book is about a woman who has to go to court and is sentenced because her boyfriend was a serial killer that murdered a lot of women, and she ends up confessing that she was aware of more than she had previously let on and confesses to being involved at the beginning of his serial killer career. Now, this book is told over a couple different timelines, one of them being when she's in a women's correctional facility, and because of that, this book definitely has some Orange is the New Black vibes. It's not my personal favorite TV show, but if you are a big fan of it, I definitely think that you'll enjoy this story a little more than I did. I'm just not really interested in reading about prison. It's not something I find very enjoyable. And Jennifer Hillier definitely does not shy away from the dark aspects of that reality. And with that, I really need to mention that this book has some serious content warnings. There is instances of abuse and sexual assault, and I was really surprised how much was in there. You know I can tolerate a lot, but I was almost disappointed how far she went. Because of that, I am more hesitant to recommend this to other people, and I don't think that it can be read very widely. And of course, if we're going to talk thrillers, we have to talk about the mystery, and this book didn't really have much of one. Most of the storyline was told to us right at the beginning. We knew how she was involved in the murders, and it's more of a character study. I just found it to be very slow paced, and while I was definitely pulled in by the beginning, which definitely starts out with a bang, once we get into kind of the meat of the story, I just didn't find it very satisfying, and the ending to me was kind of predictable and just a little bit underwhelming and honestly a bit of a letdown. So not one I would personally recommend, which is so sad to say. I love Jennifer Hillier's work, particularly her backlist titles, but I would recommend reading the stuff that she wrote before this one because I thought this one was really weak. Now let's talk about a book that I actually did enjoy, and that was The Long Walk by Stephen King. And this is a dystopian book about a group of 100 boys that are in this competition where they have to walk for as long as possible, and when they can no longer walk, they are shot dead. And it's a situation where it is the last boy standing, so they are trying to walk further than the other boys. And from the synopsis, I didn't actually think I would like this one. I've held off reading this book for quite some time because of the fact that I just thought it was stupid, but so many other people love this book, so I got in this weird mood recently where it just sounded like a good book to try, and it was available on Scribd, which is where I read most of my audiobooks, so I gave it a listen and I got really pulled into the story. I will say that while it is Stephen King, it's not really one of his horror books. Again, it's much more dystopian, and the horror comes from the darkness of the situation. And this is very much a character study because you get so invested in the boys. I really found myself caring for the characters. I understand more and more why people are so drawn to Stephen King's character work because I really did see it shine through here. The story itself is quite simple, and if I'm honest, I would have liked to see more about the world surrounding this walk and to better understand why the boys decided to do this. And of course, you do learn their individual reasons as you go along, but I just didn't find it totally satisfying, which kind of held this off from being like a 5-star read for me, but still really enjoyable, really engrossing, and it definitely held my attention. It is one of Stephen King's shorter books, which I think is good because, again, there isn't a lot to the story, but it was generally pretty satisfying and I liked it. Now I want to talk about a young adult horror book, and that was The Merciless Volume 3, Origins of Evil. Now, if you've been paying attention, I've been reading some of the Merciless books out of order. This is technically a prequel to the first book, so while you can read some of the books whichever way you want, I highly, highly recommend reading the first book before going to this one. Plus, the original Merciless is just a really good dark story. Now, this, without spoiling anything, is the story of a girl that is working on a helpline when she has a cry for help from someone, and she's able to track down that person, or so she believes, and she gets involved in a Christian community group. And of course, because this is part of the Merciless series, you know that there is a heavy element of an exorcism that is possibly going to happen and some possible possession. You find that this group of Christians are more severe and just a little bit crazier than the average ones, and the author just takes it to some dark and bloody places. As always, these books are very gruesome, and this one had some of the most gruesome scenes I've read yet. But what didn't work entirely for me with this one is the fact that it's a non-Catholic Christian group. And this isn't my religious biases coming in, or I suppose it is, but it's more for the fact that in my mind, exorcisms are always something that involve the Catholic Church and is really about their beliefs. And I don't really think that evangelical Christian groups tend to hold the same strict values when it comes to exorcisms, or at least not all the rigid rules and rituals that come around it. So to me, it just didn't totally make sense why it was a non-Catholic story about exorcisms. But definitely dark, definitely fast-paced, and of course it is YA, so there was a big focus on a love interest because the girl becomes attracted to one of the Christian guys. But if you're looking for a fun, quick read, I would still recommend it. And finally, I want to talk about a horror graphic novel, and that is The Ice Cream Man Volume 3 by W. Maxwell Prince. And again, I've been reading these out of order. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just doing that. It's not an accessibility issue. I can order them in any order I want from my library. They usually are available. But I finally did pick this one up, and this is a series that is very hit or miss with me because this is a collection of horror short stories. They are all very loosely based around a character called the Ice Cream Man that shows up in a lot of the stories, but they are entirely unrelated. So if you wanted to, you could absolutely start with Volume 3. My personal favorite so far is actually Volume 4. But this one had one of my favorite short stories in it and one of my least favorite, which made it really hard to give this a star rating. So the story that didn't work for me was a story about a couple that are in love. And what was frustrating about this is the fact that part of the story is told in Spanish, which I do not speak. And I had to go to the back of the book and constantly read the parts that were translated. And I don't want to come across as an ignorant North American. I definitely appreciate books that include authentic language and aren't just so North American centric. But in terms of a reading experience, it was very disjointed because I would look at a scene and then I couldn't even translate it on that page. I had to flip to the back, which didn't have the pictures, read the translation, and then keep flipping back and forth. And I read the story, but I could barely tell you what it was about because I just lost my immersion in it and I was just reading words at that point, which is really frustrating. So again, I appreciate that they're trying to do something different, but this one did not work for me. However, there was another story in the collection that was all about reality TV shows, but the horror versions of them. So if you like shows like Chopped, the cooking show, or The Bachelor, if you're into dating shows, this short story will definitely appeal to you. It's full of pop culture references and it's just bloody and gruesome and so much fun. I found myself laughing out loud. And for this story alone, I would recommend checking out the collection. It's usually available through Hoopla, which is available through a lot of libraries. So check it out. Even if you don't read the volume cover to cover, just hop over to this one and hopefully you will enjoy it as much as I did. So that is it for this video. And as usual, I would love to hear your opinions on the books I talked about. Are you considering picking them up? Or if you've already read them, do you agree with me, disagree? It's all good. Also, share with me one horror book that you found really surprising in a good way. I would love some recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.